Lot going on today, football-wise. Brock Purdy, Dak Prescott are the lead dogs right now in the MVP race. We will discuss that, as well as Arron Rodgers to Pat McAfee. Are we too quick to anoint players like Jordan Love? And the New York Jets go back to Zach Wilson. Tommy DeVito stays. And an article on David Tepper that makes that organization look like a disaster. We will dive into it all. But first, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Appreciate everyone that has. Share with your friends. Share with your enemies. This is a podcast, first and foremost. You can find it on Apple. You can find it on Spotify. 3 and Out with, obviously, me, John Middlekauff. And we got merch. As you can see, I'm rocking the 3 and Out hat right now. If you go to thevolume.com, we got merch. And go search these 3 and Out FlexFit hats. They're nice. I love them. I wear it every day. And before we dive into old Brock Purdy and Dakota Prescott, I need to tell you about some friends of mine. And they happen to be an app. And I need you to go to your smartphone, to your iPad, and download that app. Because it's the holiday season, and you got to get presents. I got to get presents. I got a mom, I got a brother, I got nephews, I got sister-in-law, I got girlfriend, I got her family. What do? I don't know. It's tough, right? Not when you have Gametime. Download the Gametime app and buy any pair of tickets to sporting events, concerts, comedy shows, and use the promo code JOHN for $20 off. Promo code JOHN, $20 off. Saves you $20. So you're telling me that you can get a family member, a loved one, someone who works for you, someone you work with, a partner, someone you're trying to woo as a potential client, some tickets to an event and save $20? Can't beat it. Download the Gametime app, promo code John. Holiday season, it's the season of giving. And save some money while you're at it. Gametime, promo code John. One thing I've always thought was pretty stupid ever since I started talking for a living are people that can't admit when they're wrong. And I understand having an opinion, and that's the business I'm in, and sticking with it. But eventually you get some information that you can no longer keep saying that and be taken seriously. Like, you can't, listen, I'm not the biggest LeBron guy, but if you're saying LeBron sucks in 2023, like, I can't take anything that comes out of your mouth seriously, right? And it happens a lot with football, with players. People hate guys and people love guys coming into the league. And you stick with that opinion for far too long when the information is out there. Just because you didn't like the guy as a draft pick, well, 3 or 4 years later, if the guy's been in a couple Pro Bowlers, you got to take the L. Just admit it and move on. I have a lot of opinions on coaches. I've been right on some, and I've been wrong on some, right? If Brandon Staley would have turned out to be Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan, I would have looked like an idiot because I was crushing that guy a couple games in to his career. Now, I've been proven right, but I have other ones like I've been as critical as anyone on Steve Sarkisian. I always thought he was one of the most overrated coaches in the country. Well, if he goes on to win the national championship, like I'll have nothing to say. I'll have to take the L on that one. Like, he'll forever be the guy that resurrected the University of Texas and won a fucking national championship. Now, he's got the best team buddy can buy, and his roster's loaded. His conference kind of sucks, but he beats Washington. I'm going to have to shut my mouth, right? I just am. Now, I'm going to bet heavily against him, but I'm a little nervous, not going to lie. And I've seen it forever in scouting, right? You put a high grade on a player or you put a low grade on a player, and then that guy goes the opposite of what you thought. Like, in a couple years, you just got to wave the white flag and say, I was wrong, and figure out why you're wrong. And maybe sometimes you're dealing with human beings. You can't control it, right? Sometimes that guy, there was something deep inside of him that you underestimated. And I think so many people, when it comes to Brock Purdy, just they weren't even thinking of the guy. He was just completely irrelevant to them. And when players are completely irrelevant, it's easy to have a take. Like, I think Anthony Richardson's going to be a big-time player. I think C.J. Stroud was overrated. Everyone has opinions on the top picks. Let's face it, most of the guys drafted in the 5th, 6th, 7th rounders, you just assume that guy's not going to be good, specifically at the quarterback position. You go, oh, this guy can't be good. 7th-round pick? Look at the history of the league. 7th-round picks are never any good. Who's the best 7th-round quarterback of all time? It's like Ryan Fitzpatrick, who was like, a high-level journeyman. Those guys don't go on to be franchise-level quarterbacks. If you watch Brock Purdy play, there is no disputing that he's really good. Now, should he be the MVP of the league? I don't know. I look around the MVP landscape and go, not great candidates this year. Most of the quote-unquote star players, like Mahomes doesn't have an MVP season relative to his past, right? Josh Allen, his team's playing kind of shitty. Not all his fault. But some of their big losses, he's played a big role in that, throwing some key picks, right? Lamar Jackson has kind of hit the skids a little bit relative to his numbers earlier in the season. So, yeah, I understand why he's in the mix. Listen, if Dak Prescott beats the Eagles, and then they got some tough games against the Bills, they play the Dolphins, the Cowboys schedule is pretty hard. If he keeps balling, and then they go on to win a couple playoff games, and all of a sudden they're in the NFC Championship game, I'll be the first to admit, never thought he could have done it. I've been one of the most critical guys on Dak Prescott, not because I didn't think he was a good player, not because I didn't love what he brought to the table from an intangible standpoint. I just thought, I don't know if he's good enough once you start paying him $40+ million a year. Well, if he's going to play like the way he's been playing this year, he's definitely good enough. Now, we're going to judge him in the playoffs, and if he beats either the Eagles or the 49ers, I'll be the first to take the L. But I see it over and over and over. So many people struggle to be like, change your opinion. Who gives a shit? It doesn't matter if you're wrong. Hell, even in the scouting world, people are so, it takes them so long to go, yeah, I was wrong on this guy. And I think Belichick forever, and it's easy to kind of kick him when he was down, was easily the best GM at this. Because most general managers never want to go, yeah, screw this pickup, man. This guy can't play dead in the Western. This guy stinks. And a lot of times when you draft a guy in the first couple rounds, you hold on to him for when he's not good enough for a year too long. You play him too much, and it hinders your team instead of just pivoting. Belichick was always the best during the Brady era of just trading a guy, cutting a guy, just moving on a year early instead of just keep playing a guy that can't play. And I think we do this a lot in this medium that's talking about football. I think fans struggle with it. It's okay to just go, yeah, never saw this coming. He's way better than we thought. And I think people forget, and I was talking to someone about it today, is early on, and happens a lot with later round picks, right? Because like I said, everyone has an opinion on a top drafted guy, right? Everyone had an opinion on Baker Mayfield or Johnny Manziel or Anthony Richardson or whoever, because we've watched them play. They get drafted high. There's just a lot of talk. When you get drafted in the 7th round, have you ever watched the draft? It's hard to stay locked in the 5th, 6th, 7th round. On television, they start going to the zoo. They start screwing around. The broadcast doesn't even focus anymore. And listen, when I went to practice Brock Purdy's rookie year, I didn't know that much about him. I mean, I knew he played a big role on Iowa State, helped Matt Campbell become a name that was, USC, Ohio State, Michigan. A lot of teams were sniffing around Matt Campbell, but not in a million years. Little guy from Iowa State. I would have bet against him without even knowing that much. As we sit here today, I go, fuck, I don't know where the Niners would be without him. Does that mean he's the best player on the team? I don't know. They have one of the best left tackles of all time. They have one of the most versatile running backs of all time. They have the best linebacker in the league. But guess what? Most great quarterbacks that have a lot of team success play on really good teams with a lot of other really good players. Like when Peyton Manning went to Denver, guess what? They had a lot of dudes. DeMarcus Ware, Von Miller. Ever heard of them? Right? Those guys are pretty good. Benefited from having a really good defense, right? So some players, like Joe Montana, last I checked, play with a lot of Hall of Famers. So just because you have good players around you, I think we love diminishing that. He's just Steph Curry is one of the best players we've ever seen. He literally played on a team that was arguably the best starting lineup of all time with Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson in his prime, and Andre Iguodala. What do you think he just would have been as sweet as he was and would have been as important to the league if he had played with me, you, and 2 other guys? Of course not. Most great players need other really good players. Michael Jordan benefited from, playing for Phil Jackson, having Scottie Pippen right next to him, and Dennis Rodman and B.J. Armstrong and Ron Harper. You can't do this by yourself. This isn't golf. This isn't just like Tiger Woods out there in his prime just kicking everyone's ass. You need help. Peyton Manning had a lot of help, even in Indianapolis, right? And let's face it, sometimes they were limited on defense, and that was a problem why they couldn't get over the hump. Their defense wasn't good enough. So this notion of people just unwilling to admit, whenever I see people, Purdy's overrated, Purdy, he's pretty fucking good. Now, who are we comparing him to? Are we comparing him like Dan Marino, Joe Montana, and Patrick Mahomes? Well, yeah, that's unfair. But just in a vacuum, if you're watching them this year and you can't just go, God, that guy's pretty good. Dakota Prescott has been a guy that I've always, I don't really see it. I think he's a solid player, but when they start paying him $40 million a year, I'm like, I don't know. Well, if Dak goes on he easily could win the MVP, right? He beats the Eagles, then he plays the Bills and the Dolphins, throws for 35, 37 touchdowns. they win the division. They're a 1 or 2 seed. He goes and wins a couple playoff games. I'll be the first to admit, never saw that coming. I would have bet against it. And I have, because that's always been my take. Like, he's not good enough. I was saying the same thing about Kirk Cousins. And then I'm watching Kirk Cousins slice and dice the Niners. Kevin O'Connell's like, this is the best football he's ever played. I'm like, fuck, I never thought he would be this good. He really became it. And I think so often people just struggle with, like, just say what you see. And when you see some guy playing well, we just playing well, right? I thought Jalen Hurts was an NFL running back. And then last year you're watching him play, you're like, God damn, this guy's pretty good, right? So this notion of people unwilling to change their opinions, whether you work in the league, whether you do this for a living, is just so stupid to me. Like, some things are pretty obvious. Brock Purdy's a good player. Dak Prescott's a good player. Do they benefit from playing with other good players and being on well-run organizations? Of course. Like, most great players that have success with their team don't play for shitty organizations, right? Don't play for shitty coaches. That's not the way it works, especially in the sport of football. You need a good coach and you need talent around you. And usually you need, unless you're Peyton Manning and like can literally call the plays, you need a good play caller. So Brock Purdy or Dak Prescott, odds-on favorite right now to win the MVP. And I think it's safe to say that one of those two guys might win the MVP, right? I would say they're probably one of those two guys is going to win the MVP. Now, is Brock Purdy the greatest MVP of all time, or Dak Prescott? Like, I don't know. But on this given year, it's really not that crazy. And if you just watch the two of them play right now, you have to go, yeah, they're really freaking good. And isn't that the point of all this? Like, can you watch a guy? Is he good or is he not? Right? I mean, how many guys have we watched that we want to be good? And you're like, God, I do not see it. This is not happening. And that is definitely not the case with Brock Purdy. With Dak, I mean, he's been in the league a long time. He's just kind of putting it all together, which some guys, now Dak had a good season a couple years ago, but then he shit the bed back-to-back years in the playoffs. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on him in the playoffs, but I'll be the first to admit, like, he goes and plays well this weekend and keeps rattling off wins against really good teams. Like, he's a really deserving candidate. And I would have to eat crow, especially if he like took the Cowboys to the Super Bowl. Like, yeah, that contract they gave him was worth every penny. Can you believe we're this deep into the NFL season? We got to make every second count. With DraftKings Sportsbook, you can make the most out of every game. Bet on your favorite teams for a shot at winning big bucks. New customers can score $150 instantly in bonus bets for betting $5 on any matchup. So right now, get in on the action with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Download the app now and use the code JOHN. New customers can score $150 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on the NFL. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code JOHN. The crown is yours. Arron Rodgers said something that I thought was pretty interesting, that we're too quick to shit on guys and too quick to anoint them. Speaking of Jordan Love, and basically he told McAfee that, you know, he holds no bitterness, and, you know, obviously he wishes things would have played out differently in Green Bay, which I think, I mean, he played a big role in that, and he admitted that, like, he wishes things he could have done differently, but then he roots for these guys. And listen, some people are able to live in this like vengeful, hold a lot of animosity toward other people forever. And, you know, I think Colin said this once upon a time, that holding a grudge is like chain smoking hate. Some people can pull it off, right, and be really successful. Portnoy is a good example. He's very spiteful, and it fuels them, and it works. For me, whenever I do that, it just creates, I don't like the way I feel. I think it makes me counterproductive. So I've really, in my latter years, in my 30s, tried to be much more of a positive person when things in my past haven't worked out for whatever reason. And it served me well. And I do take Arron at face value when he says, like, yeah, I'm rooting for these guys, specifically Jordan Love. Now, my pushback would be, we're too quick to crush guys and anoint guys. The general manager of the Green Bay Packers, Brian Gutekunst, was the guy that went on record several weeks ago that said these last 10 games for Jordan Love will determine his status for the team. Because that's a fact, right? When you're a coach, when you're a GM, you evaluate every game. And when you have a guy like him, who is, contracts and years matter, right? They have him on a 2-year, $11 million deal. So if he would have sucked like he did early in the season all year long, they would have been in position to draft a guy, and he wouldn't be their quarterback anymore. Just like Brian Gutekunst said, these next 10 games are going to go a lot to determine his future. Well, he's playing well. They're winning games. He will continue to be their quarterback now, and they're not going to draft a quarterback anymore. He changed the narrative. But internally in that building, whether it's LaFleur, whether it's Gutekunst, whether it's everyone with the Packers, they're constantly evaluating you. And they're trying to figure out, are you not good enough? Or are we just anointing you as our starter moving forward? That's the job. That's part of the deal. Now, putting guys on pedestals, like, listen, this is back to the Purdy thing. Anyone acting like Purdy is like destined to go to the Hall of Fame or going to be an all-time great quarterback, we got a long way to go. Anyone doing that is an idiot. But anyone that can't say, like, Jordan Love these last 3 weeks looks freaking awesome. Brock Purdy in 2023 has been mostly a badass. I can't help you. And there were moments with Jordan Love where it was rocky. And now looking back, you go, kind of understandable. Hadn't played at all despite being an older guy and has figured it out. The other thing that's, very eye-opening is, and I guess we knew this when he was drafted, but the physical skills. He's got a big arm. He can move. His accuracy is a little hit or miss, but I can live with average accuracy if you're a big-time playmaker. That's always what Josh Allen had. Josh Allen was never going to be Drew Brees, Steve Young. That wasn't Peyton Manning. He's not going to be some pinpoint guy, but he's going to make so many freaking plays, it won't matter, and he'll overcome that. Now, I'm not acting like Jordan Love is about to become Josh Allen, but if you can become a big playmaker like he has become these last, 3 weeks, then he can carve out a niche as a really good starting quarterback. I don't know if he'd ever be, best case scenario, a top 5 guy, but you sure as hell can be a top 12 guy. And if you're a top 12 guy, I can build a playoff roster around you. And in the NFL, if I'm going to the playoffs every year, listen, even if we don't, quote unquote, ever make a Super Bowl run or ever win a Super Bowl, who cares? If I'm just winning 10, 11 games and being good on a yearly basis, that's all that matters. And I think the Packers are definitely in an intriguing spot now to be kind of that level team. And then just how good the guy can become. Because one thing we've learned, people forget, people thought Tom Brady was not that good relative to Peyton Manning in like 02, 03, 04. And that's when he was winning Super Bowls. A lot of people said very similar things that they're saying about Purdy. Not comparing Brock Purdy to Tom Brady, the player. But sometimes when you win, people want to, it's the team, it's the roster, it's this. We did it with Russell Wilson, right? It was Legion of Boom and everything. And obviously, he didn't have to do as much for some of those teams. But then when he started getting big money, the team started winning less, but he started becoming a great player. So there are always going to be a lot of variables with these guys. But right now, the Packers have a 2-year, $11 million contract with a guy that looks like you can go to the playoffs with. And you get 2 years to evaluate it. And that's an awesome position to be in, especially if you like the guy. He's coachable. He understands your offense. He fits what you're trying to do. That's all you can ask for. And I would say if they make the playoffs this year, you would fucking be ecstatic. I mean, it'd be one. I simply bet against the Packers this year based on the law of averages. It's like, who goes from Favre to Rodgers to just another top 15 quarterback? That never happens. I think the only one I could ever find was the 49ers. Went from Joe Montana to Steve Young to Garcia, who was never going to go to a Hall of Fame, but made several Pro Bowls, was really good, and they go to the playoffs with him. If Jordan Love becomes their Jeff Garcia, it's truly one of the great draft picks of all time. I mean, it really is. And based on these last 3 years, I don't know why, or last 3 games, I don't know why he couldn't. Now, we'll see how this plays out. I think they play the Giants this week, but you got to give them a lot of credit. Things change, right? I mean, 3 or 4 years ago, Uber was a dog shit company. They were losing money. They were, marred in scandal. It was a disaster. Now, as we sit here in 2023, because of the lockdowns, Uber Eats started thriving. Now their driver business makes money. Companies crushing. Things change. Sometimes they take a while to change. Sometimes they take a month to change. And my job is just evaluate it and talk about it as it changes. I'm never stuck on opinion. I thought Jordan Love stunk. Now I think he's pretty good. We'll see. We'll evaluate him game by game because that's all we got to go off of. That's what Brian Gutekunst is doing. That's what Matt LaFleur's doing. That's what Packer fans are doing. It's exciting, right? I mean, the reason 49er fans are so quick to defend their guy is because they're watching them go, this guy's pretty good. What are we talking about? Like, he's making $800,000. Hell, if he was playing like this, making $35 million, we'd feel good about it. If he's making $800,000 and he's on pace to throw 30 touchdowns and be the starting quarterback on a team that wins 13 or 14 games, and everyone's taking a shit on him because you thought he sucked 2 years ago, that seems like a you problem. So yeah, this quarterback stuff, man, it's just, it gets everyone in a tizzy because everyone is just they struggle so much to just change their opinion. I never understand that. I have nothing in common with that. I'll change my opinion tomorrow, yesterday. We're talking football players. They're constantly changing. Some are getting worse. Some are getting better. Some are going through struggles. You just evaluate what you see. When I worked as a scout, what did we do? We just evaluated the games. No broadcaster, all 22. You put in some AirPods, listen to some music, listen to the radio, and you just fucking evaluated players. It was very emotionless. It's like, good or bad? Is he getting worse or are you getting better? Give the guy a grade. That's the business. And it's pretty easy to see when a guy's playing well or a guy's playing not well. It's like the Jets. I've been saying this over and over. Everyone, when the story broke about Diana Rossini said that Zach Wilson didn't want to come back, it was so easy to go after Zach Wilson. And like, I'm done having opinions on Zach Wilson, the person, the player. To me, this whole thing revolves around the Jets. It's easy to be like, oh, this guy has to play. It's his job. And listen, of course, if they want you to be the starter, you got to be the starter. They're paying you $9 million. To me, this is more about the musical chairs now for 2 straight years of getting in this situation. This is a reflection of the general manager. This is a reflection of the coach. And one thing I've heard over and over from people in the loop is it's not easy to work for Woody Johnson. He's got to have a lot of opinions. He always wants to talk to the GM. He gives ideas. David Tepper is doing something similar right now. So when I see Zach Wilson playing, I go, I bet the owner wanted to see him. And honestly, if the owner did, I'd probably side with him. Like, we're just going to suck with Tim Boyle? What's the point of that? We're paying this guy $9 million. Even if he does suck, let's just put him on the field. We're not winning games as it is. It's not like the guy you're bringing up off the scrap heap looks any good. What's the fucking point of playing him? Maybe we catch lightning in a bottle and he looks kind of good. And maybe we can offload him this offseason. I don't know. But there's no point from a value standpoint to play anybody but Zach Wilson. Zero. Just like the New York Giants sticking with Tommy DeVito. In what world, you're so out of it, you're not sniffing the playoffs, your team stinks, would you go back to Tyrod Taylor? Tyrod Taylor is someone you play when you are trying to win a game because your backup is injured. Or excuse me, your starting quarterback is injured. And you're trying to keep your season alive. Your season's over. It's dead. So if you told me that John Mara looked at Brian Daboll on the coaching staff and said, listen, even when Tyrod's better, play DeVito the rest of the season. Let's see what we got. Why wouldn't you? I talked to a scout that went through Illinois. Do you know what he told me? He's like, Tommy DeVito's not bad. Because one thing we've seen with Illinois is not much change on their offense beside him. And they are dramatically shittier on offense. No one's acting like DeVito is the next Brock Purdy. But maybe he's not terrible. And maybe he could be your backup the next couple of years. So why would you not play him? Coaches are always, and this is a great part about the NFL, is the tanking. Everyone's always trying to win no matter what. No one's ever trying to throw a game. Maybe the last game of the season. Hell, the Miami Dolphins owner offered Brian Flores all that cash every game to lose, and he refused. So coaches are very prideful, rightfully so. Players definitely are. But that's the right move. Play Tommy DeVito. Play Zach Wilson. How's this even a question mark? Now, Zach Wilson, I guess one thing I would defend him, like, you're just fucking with me nonstop. Like, you bench me, you bring me back. You did it last year, which a lot of that was self-inflicted. I acted like an idiot. But this year, from all reports, is like he's been much more mature. It's one thing to go last year to Mike White. Mike White's a real backup. It's another thing to bring Tim fucking Boyle. I mean, is Tim Boyle starting in the XFL or the UFL or the European League or whoever the hell's some 7-on-7 league? No. So to do that, I understand Zach Wilson. Like, you guys can't stand me anymore. So now you're going to throw me back in there? Now, part of it is it's easy to say, be a professional. We hear that all the time with pro athletes. Think about your own job, right? We obviously, most of us don't make, $9 million a year. So something that comes with the money is like, you got to take the shit. But it's, how often do you get angry at a boss, at a coworker, at an employee? And it's like, God, I gotta act like a pro here. But you don't want it. For whatever reason, someone pisses you off, someone screws you in business, an employee just won't listen to you, a partner is being shitty, and you're like, it's so easy to be like, be professional. Like, we're all human beings. It's easy. We all get to a breaking point. We all, are biased in our own world and think we're getting screwed. So I understand if it is true that he was hesitant to go, now he's ultimately starting. Maybe they talked him into it. I know Arron Rodgers shit on the report, but regardless, like, it's much more of a reflection of this Jets turmoil to me than it is Zach Wilson. We learned who Zach Wilson was last year. Not very good. We knew that the Jets were completely over Zach Wilson, but because Arron Rodgers and the Packers situation fell into his lap, they're like, oh, let's just keep him because they're kind of buddies. And we've seen this year what we saw last year. If you play him, you'll lose games. Like, that's a fact, Jack. So once you start going back and forth with all these no-name quarterbacks, just put yourself in his situation. Maybe you're like, God, this sucks. Now, ultimately, he did the right thing. That's all that matters. But I could understand him on Monday, like, oh, we're really doing this again? We're playing this musical chairs? It would suck. I mean, he's a human being. Something magical happens when the third quarter ends and the fourth quarter begins. The energy changes. The fourth quarter is where games are won, where champions are made. And in business, it's where sales teams become legends. That's why HubSpot built Sales Hub, to give sales reps the deal-making tools they need to win in Q4 and close the year strong. Sales Hub Prospecting Workplaces organizes your schedule, goals, and to-do lists in one place to save your team precious fourth quarter time. Smart sequences help sales reps close deals faster than ever. And with an easy-to-use deal management tool, reps can find, track, and close deals all in one place. Plus, AI forecasting helps you accurately predict future success, which means less hoping for deals and more crushing targets. Put your sales team on the fast track to winning Q4 with Sales Hub. Learn more at HubSpot.com/sales. One story I saw today, The Athletic wrote this piece on the Carolina Panthers. And one thing in the NFL in general, when things get really, really ugly, because there's so much money in the line, right? I mean, you're talking position coaches are making $500,000 to $800,000, coordinators making 1 to 3, obviously head coaches making a ton, GMs that it's hard to get a GM job. Everyone starts pointing fingers. Everyone starts blaming people. And everyone tries to curry favor with the owner because ultimately they're in charge of hiring and firing everybody. And the story basically, the headline was the Carolina Panthers is essentially the Hunger Games of the NFL, which, I don't, even if you didn't watch the Hunger Games in the movie theater, you would have seen it on television over the years because I swear to God, TNT played it like every other day. Even though I was thinking about this on YouTube TV, like when I had Comcast or whatever, you're listening to this, if you just have, the cable and you haven't cut the cords yet, you would just stumble onto a lot of movies. You'd be like, oh, Con Air, oh, The Rock, oh, Hunger Games, Shawshank. With YouTube TV, you don't really stumble upon anything. Like I basically just feeds me through the algorithm. It knows I watch games. It knows I watch the Golf Channel, and it knows I watch CNBC. Like I don't watch random channels anymore, where I used to stumble on a lot of those with cable television. So I do wonder if the movie scene, and maybe that'll change with like Netflix and stuff, but even you don't go to Netflix often or Amazon Prime or Apple Plus or HBO Max and just watch a random movie from like your childhood, right? Where you would on cable. It's always struck me like that's something that's going to die over time. I've watched Shawshank, parts of it 700 times. I've watched Goodfellas or Casino or The Godfather, just bits and pieces of it over the years, 75 times. I just don't know if that's going to happen anymore. But back to David Tepper and the Hunger Games. That Tepper, part of this article is that he would give ideas. He'd have coordinate people on the staff. One thing, because like he's taking this business mindset, right, of all these different strategies, bring people into your building with different ideas, have a specific onboarding practice, try to hire people that think differently than you. It's very techie. It's very financy. It's very just the private sector. Yet in football, if you look at like Andy Reid's staff, who's just rattling off Super Bowls, look at some of his key guys. Matt Nagy, known him for 15 years. Brett Veach, known him for 20. Spagnuolo, coach for him 20 years ago. Right? I mean, Tom Melvin, been on the staff forever. His offensive line coach, been there the whole time. Dave Tobe, the special teams coach, entire time. So Dave Tepper wanted Frank to hire all these coaches he didn't know. instead of just letting him, I don't know, hire a staff. And there's a difference of just hiring people and just hiring good people. Like, obviously, the Andys, the Harbaughs, like, they know a lot of people, but they're good. And clearly, Frank was forced, because the only way he was getting a job is to listen to everything David Tepper was telling him to do, to hire a bunch of guys he didn't know. And all these guys have no loyalty to him. And they have completely stabbed him in the back, even if Frank sucks. But part of the story is they're constantly texting the owner, like, his footwork's falling apart. And the GM doing this too. The GM constantly doing this to Tepper. And then Tepper would tell Frank that he needs to work on Bryce Young's footwork. And I completely understand big picture stuff. Like I said with the Jets, if I was Woody Johnson, put Zach Wilson back in the fucking game, Robert. He's starting this week. If I'm John Mara, I don't want to see Tyrod Taylor. Just play Tommy DeVito. People around Jersey, people around the Meadowlands, enjoy it. It's the only positive thing we have going for us. Tommy DeVito, Tommy Cutlets starts. Completely understand that level of meddling when my team stinks. I don't understand talking about specifically like, hey, work on his arm mechanics. Work on his footwork in the pocket. Dave Tepper knows nothing about footwork in the pocket. Hell, most scouts and coaches don't know it that well. The hardest thing to coach in America is the quarterback, right? So once he's getting involved like that, they're destined to be screwed. And I do wonder, how are they going to get a coach to come into this organization? How are they going to get someone to come into a place where clearly the owner is kind of has some Dan Snyder qualities and has unlimited money? So, yeah, I mean, ultimately it's the NFL. There are only so many jobs. And if he pays you $30-40 million and you're making $1 million as a coordinator, who's turning that down? But you're kind of selling your soul. Like within 2 years, you could be, shit out of luck. It could be over. And I just wonder, like, these stories. I was talking to a buddy today, like, how many stories? Because I've taken a lot of people in, like, Giants Twitter were like, you don't know what you're talking about. You've never been to a training camp. The journalism, I'm not a journalist. I'm not a fucking media member. I'm just telling you what I know. And I know it to be fact. The Giants have issues. Yeah, I'm not at training camp. It's fucking 2023. It's called text messages, phone calls, DMs, and knowing a lot of people in the National Football League. I'm not just saying it to say it. I don't even care. It doesn't matter to me. I can give two shits about the Giants. I'm just telling you they got issues. They got problems. I'm not just making that out of thin air. But how often do you hear these stories of, like, a lot of issues up there, a lot of issues internally, and then it turns out it was all false? In my time around the NFL, now I got it hired in 2010, and it's 13 years later. I'm still around it, talking about it, do this for a living. I don't remember one story that broke from a Glazer, from a Schefter, from people that know people in the NFL about animosity, about weird shit going on, like Dave Tepper. I saw it with Harbaugh. I've seen it with the Raiders, like, some red flag internally, and it not turned out to be true. I'm not saying word for word every specific thing being reported is true, but usually where there's smoke, there's fire in the NFL. And one thing that has always covered that up is winning. So when you win, it doesn't mean you don't have internal problems. I saw it when I first got out of the NFL and started working in radio with the Harbaugh 49ers. They were having success, and they were a disaster internally. You're going to the NFC Championship. You're winning 12 games. You're sending half your roster to the Pro Bowl. Everyone keeps their mouth shut. The moment you start losing a couple games, the moment you're not playing in January, shit hits the fan. And the moment you win 1 game, 3 games, 4 games, that's a long season for a lot of angry people. People start talking. People start singing, quick. People in the NFL like to talk, man. And a lot of times when you work that much and you're stuck in this office and things are going really poorly, you feel like you can't tell anybody. You feel like no one knows what's actually going on. And I would imagine Tepper is, like, furious. All this stuff's leaking out. But I would say 90% plus of everything you read about the situation is true. Why people want it out. People want you to know what a disaster situation is going on there. And when you get this new owner, when you get a guy with all this money, when you get a guy with all this ego, and rightfully so, if you told me, in 10 years, say we're 11 years, when I'm 50 years old, you're like, John, you fucking made $100 million in this podcast thing and this internet thing, making some investments. You've done really well. Do you think my ego is going to be smaller or bigger? Doesn't mean I'm not going to treat people well or whatever. But do you think I'm going to have more belief in myself to be successful or less? Right? So if you're a David Tepper and you go, this guy's made billions of dollars. When you talk about like the greatest people on Wall Street of all time, it's like a short list. His name comes up. You're talking like the Buffetts, Charlie Mungers, RIP. Like it's pretty quick for David Tepper to be Steve Cohen to be discussed. So you don't think this guy, even though he doesn't know anything about plays, footwork, and shit, doesn't believe he knows how to make it successful, even if he's wrong? You're crazy. That's not how these guys think. That's what I've said forever about Belichick. If you think Belichick at 71 years old is going to go quietly when he's been making $20 million for a decade, when he's fucking rattled off 6 Super Bowls, when even if Brady was a bigger reason than him, he's the reason Brady was there. He's the guy that made Brady the starter. He's the guy that built great defenses around Brady. He's the guy that hired all these coaches. You're fucking on drugs. Like his ego right now, even in a rough time, and right now it's never been uglier. If you don't think Belichick deep down believes he knows what he's doing, you're out of your mind. And if you don't think Dave Tepper believes he has good ideas how to make this work, you're crazy. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to, and it's clearly not. Same thing with Dan Snyder. Dan Snyder got that team early. He made a bunch of money. Dude had a private jet by the time he was like 30 years old. So sometimes when you get the money really quick, you just get this inflated sense of like, I know everything, even if you don't. And that's the hardest thing. Like the finance world, the marketing world, the internet world has nothing to do with a football team. Nothing. It's why so often, like there was a story about Kevin Warren, the former Big Ten commissioner, who's now the Bears president. Like he's trying to like stronghold his way into power, or he gets to run that organization. You know why he's doing that? Because even if he was the president and he dealt with suite sales, he built the Bears a new stadium. He helped make the owners an extra $1 billion. He became one of the great NFL businessmen, cash cows in league history. Let's just use that hypothetical. He wouldn't get 100th of the credit if he was the lead guy to hiring a coach that won them Super Bowl. In football, you get all the credit for the football team. It doesn't matter how much your team's making. It doesn't matter how sweet your stadium is. None of that shit matters. That's why so many business people want to be in charge and run the football operation. It's why so many owners want to get the credit when the team starts winning. And it's difficult. And it's why most teams don't win. And David Tepper, to me, feels farther away when you read these stories. Because again, like I said, when this stuff comes out, it comes out for a reason. I fucking always believe it's true. Because you know why? I would say 95%, it always has a ton of validity. It feels like they are farther away now, however many years after he bought the team, than he was when he first purchased the team for $2.4 billion or whatever he paid. And that sucks if you're a Panthers fan. That sucks if you're like, God, what are we doing here? Like, how is this going to get any better? And the reality is, it's just not. Not until he realizes just cut the checks, take a step back, enjoy your fucking life, and let your GM and let your coach cook. You got to be willing to go through some hard times. Because if you're not, it's going to suck. And you're going to consistently lose. And you're just going to be a miserable rich guy. And that's what Dan Snyder was forever. That's what David Tepper is shaping up to be. Because this is not like some retirement gig where you just like pay for the team and then just chill if you want to be involved. Because if you're going to be involved, then it's not going to go well. It's a miserable business to be in. Losing in football sucks. And there's not much you can do about it. And their team lacks talent. If the quarterback's wrong, the other thing you're going to have to do, he's like adamant, like this quarterback. What if the quarterback's not the guy? In a couple of years, you're going to have to pivot. And you're going to have to be willing to pivot. Because it's pretty clear, like the one game they started Andy Dalton this year, they were much better on offense. Like Andy Dalton right now is a better player than Bryce Young. Now, I also understand playing Andy Dalton any snaps is a waste of time. You got to play the kid. But clearly this guy is completely overwhelmed. He's getting worse. So you could argue maybe it's not crazy, just like take a deep breath. And maybe they should have sat him for a couple more games during the season. But they didn't, because the owner never would let him. He's too involved. Like, what's the point in paying your coach to make those decisions? Because the rumors were that they wanted to sit him down. And the owner just doesn't want to listen. So I don't know, man. I feel bad for you Panthers fans.